I was standing in the middle of a five-star ballroom, holding my 7-year-old daughter while blood ran down the side of her face. My own brother had just struck her. My own parents stood 3 feet away. They watched. They did nothing. They thought I would break right there on that marble floor. They had no idea that 2 police officers were already walking through the front doors of that hotel. They had no idea that everything they had spent their whole lives building was about to collapse in front of 200 guests. And they had no idea that what I was about to do that night would follow them for the rest of their lives. Before we go any further, tell me something. Where are you watching this from tonight? What city? What time is it right where you are? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and it means more to me than you know that people from every corner of the world sit down and listen to stories like mine. My name is Maya. Until the night I'm about to tell you about, I was the kind of woman who apologized for things that weren't her fault. The kind who kept the peace at the cost of her own heart. I'm 31 years old. I design interiors for a living in Charleston, South Carolina, a city that loves its old families and its old secrets. I have a husband named Daniel, who has loved me through things I'm almost ashamed to admit I let happen. And I have a daughter named Sophie. 7 years old. The softest soul I have ever met. She collects rocks she thinks are pretty. She cries during nature documentaries when the baby animals get separated from their mothers. She is, without question, the best thing I have ever done with my life. Every ounce of disrespect I swallowed from my own family for 31 years, I told myself I was doing it to protect her. I was wrong. I was only feeding the people who would eventually try to destroy her. To understand how we ended up on that ballroom floor, you need to understand my brother Tyler. Tyler is 2 years younger than me. From the day he was born, he was treated like the future of our family. I was treated like the staff. Our parents, Richard and Diane, didn't just love him more. They built their entire identity around him. Every failure he had was someone else's fault. Every dream he had was something I was expected to fund. The first time I understood my place, I was 18. I had a full scholarship offer to an art school 2 states away. I was packing boxes when my mother sat me down at the kitchen table and told me Tyler needed the family's savings for his culinary program in Atlanta. You can study design here, locally, she said. Tyler is going to put this family on the map. I gave up that scholarship. I stayed. I went to community college at night while I watched my parents post pictures of Tyler's new apartment near his cooking school. That was just the beginning. Over the next 10 years, I watched Tyler open 3 restaurants. All 3 failed. Every single time, my father called me with the same line. He's your brother. Family helps family. By the time Tyler was 28, I had quietly handed over almost $31,000 of my own savings to cover his debts. Money I had planned to use for Sophie's future. Money that bought my parents silence instead of their gratitude. I want you to remember that number. $31,000. Because before this story is over, it is going to matter again, in a way none of us saw coming that night. Then Tyler met Chloe. Chloe came from an old, wealthy Charleston family, the kind that has its own wing at the Historical Society. She was elegant, sharp, and just as image-obsessed as my parents. When they got engaged, my parents threw themselves into planning a $70,000 wedding at the old Ashworth estate, a restored plantation house turned event venue on the edge of the city. Money I knew, somewhere in the back of my mind, had partly come from the very accounts I had been quietly refilling for a decade. Daniel didn't want me to go. Maya, look at the guest list, he said, scrolling through the wedding website on his phone. Your name isn't even listed as immediate family. You're listed under extended guests. I told him we had to go. Sophie had already picked out her dress. She kept twirling in the living room asking if she'd get to dance with Uncle Tyler. I had no idea that night, my daughter wasn't invited as a guest. She was invited as a target. The reception at Ashworth Estate looked like something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers. A live string quartet. 200 guests in black tie, sipping champagne under restored antique fixtures. Daniel and I were seated at the very last table, closest to the kitchen doors. Sophie sat between us in her little ivory dress, swinging her legs, eating cake off a tiny plate. About an hour into the reception, Daniel's phone lit up. An emergency call from a client whose shipment had been held up at customs. He mouthed sorry and slipped outside toward the courtyard to take it. I didn't think anything of it. I had no idea that the 10 minutes he was gone were the exact 10 minutes my brother had been waiting for. Less than 10 minutes after Daniel left, the string quartet stopped playing. I looked up and saw Tyler standing near the head table, his face arranged into something that looked almost like panic. Almost. "Someone took my grandmother's ring," he announced into a microphone, his voice cutting through the ballroom. "The sapphire ring. The one I was giving Chloe tonight as a wedding gift. It was sitting right here in its box, and now it's gone." Whispers rippled through the crowd. I assumed some careless guest had knocked it off the table. I leaned down to wipe frosting off Sophie's chin. Then I heard footsteps stop directly behind my chair. I turned around. Tyler was standing there, my parents right behind him, Chloe and her family a few feet further back, all of them staring down at me. "Tyler, what's going on?" I asked. "Your daughter," he said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "was hanging around the gift table all night. Alone. She was sitting right here," I said, standing, pulling Sophie closer. "She never left this table." "Don't lie for her, Maya," my mother said, stepping forward, her voice flat and cold. "We all know how careless you are with her." "I didn't take anything," Sophie whispered, tears already filling her eyes. "I promise." Before I could say another word, Tyler grabbed Sophie's small cardigan off the back of her chair. He shoved his hand into the pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. The sapphire ring sat inside, catching the light. The room gasped. Chloe's mother pressed a hand to her chest. Unbelievable. In that little girl's pocket, of all places. I stared at that ring, my mind racing. Sophie's cardigan had been on the back of her chair the entire night. She hadn't gone near the gift table once. Then I caught Tyler's eye for a fraction of a second, and the panic on his face flickered into something else entirely. Something smug. That's when it hit me. Tyler had planted that ring in my daughter's pocket himself. I opened my mouth to say exactly that. I never got the chance. Behind us, near the dessert table, stood a tall iron-framed champagne tower, dozens of glasses stacked in a glittering pyramid, lit from beneath with soft gold light. Tyler's face twisted from fake panic into something raw and furious. He needed a show for Chloe's family, and he needed it fast. He grabbed the edge of that heavy iron stand and shoved it. It wasn't aimed at me. The entire tower of glass came down directly toward where Sophie was standing, frozen, clutching my hand. I yanked her back half a second too late. The corner of the falling iron frame caught the side of her head as glasses shattered across the marble floor around her feet. She didn't even have time to scream. She just went down. Sophie. The sound that came out of me didn't feel human. I dropped to my knees on broken glass, scooping her into my arms. Blood was already running from a cut above her ear, soaking into her blonde hair, dripping onto the front of her white dress and onto my hands. She was conscious, gasping, her small fingers gripping my wrist. I looked up at the circle of faces around us. I looked straight at my mother. "Call an ambulance," I said. "Now. She's bleeding from her head." My mother didn't move. She stepped closer to Tyler instead, brushing glass dust off his sleeve. "He didn't mean for it to go that far," she said, looking down at me with something close to disgust. "But you brought a child who steals into this venue. You brought this on yourselves." My father nodded along, arms crossed over his tuxedo. "Take her and go, Maya. You've embarrassed this family enough for one night." In that exact moment, with my daughter's blood soaking through my dress and my own parents defending the man who had just hurt her, something in me went completely still. The version of me that spent 31 years trying to earn their love died right there on that floor. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to take this entire room apart, piece by piece. And the worst part for my family wasn't even going to be what I did. It was going to be what I let them keep doing to themselves once the truth came out. The side doors burst open. Daniel ran in, took one look at me on the floor with Sophie, and went white. He didn't ask a single question. He dropped down, checked her pulse with shaking hands, then pulled out his phone and dialed 911 himself. I stood up. I didn't wipe the blood off my hands. Within minutes, 2 paramedics pushed through the crowd with a stretcher. Tyler stepped in front of them, smoothing his jacket, already trying to downplay it. "It's fine, it's just a small accident, we don't need." I walked straight past him and grabbed the lead paramedic's arm. "My brother pushed an iron display stand into my 7-year-old daughter," I said, my voice flat and steady. "I want every injury documented. I want this treated as what it is." They got to work immediately. Daniel climbed into the back of the ambulance with Sophie. I stayed behind. I had one more thing to finish. 2 police officers walked in just as the ambulance pulled away. My father stepped forward first, using the same smooth voice he used in every business deal he'd ever closed. "Officers, I'm a longtime friend of this venue's owner. This is my son's wedding, it's just been a small family misunderstanding." I stepped past him before he could finish. "I'm the mother of the child who was hurt tonight," I said, looking directly at the officer's body camera. "My brother shoved a heavy iron display stand into my daughter after planting his fiancée's ring in her pocket. I want this investigated, and I want it on record right now." Tyler laughed, a little too loudly, pointing at Sophie's cardigan still draped over the chair. "She had the ring in her pocket. I have witnesses." My mother and Chloe's parents started talking over each other, already rewriting the story for the officers. I didn't argue with any of them. I turned to the venue manager, who was hovering near the doorway, pale and frozen. "This estate has security cameras over every table in this ballroom," I said, pointing to the small black lens mounted above the dessert display. "I want that footage pulled right now. And I want it played on the projector screen so every single person in this room can see exactly what happened." The manager, already thinking about liability, didn't hesitate. "My family had to face that night, you're not even close. What happened in the next 90 minutes inside that police report was just the beginning of everything they were about to lose." The lead officer asked me to step outside with him to give a statement while his partner stayed behind with Tyler. I told him everything. The cardigan. The footage. The $31,000 I had quietly handed over for a decade, which I mentioned only because he asked if there was a pattern of conflict in the family. There was. There had always been one. I had just never said it out loud to anyone wearing a badge before. By the time I finished talking, the officer's partner was already walking Tyler toward the parking lot in handcuffs. Not for the ring. For the assault. Charleston County doesn't treat an act caught on camera, against a child, as a misunderstanding, no matter how many lawyers your family knows. My mother tried one last time. She grabbed my arm in the parking lot as they put Tyler in the back of the cruiser. "You're really going to do this to your own brother? Over an accident?" I looked at her hand on my arm until she let go. "He's not my brother tonight," I said. "He's the man who put my daughter in an ambulance. There's a difference, and you're the only person here who still can't see it." I left her standing under the valet lights and drove straight to the hospital. Sophie needed 4 stitches above her ear. The doctor said another inch lower and we would have been having a very different conversation that night. I sat with her until she fell asleep holding the little rock she always carried in her cardigan pocket, the same cardigan that had just been used as evidence in a police report 2 hours earlier. Daniel sat beside me in that hospital room and said the only thing that mattered. "We're done with them, Maya. All of them. Whatever happens next, we're not doing this anymore." For the first time in 31 years, I agreed completely. What happened over the following weeks is the part most people never get to see in families like mine, because families like mine spend so much money making sure nobody ever does. Tyler was charged with assault on a minor and released on bail 2 days later. Chloe's family didn't just walk away from the wedding. Her father, who happened to sit on the board of 2 of the city's largest commercial lenders, made one phone call. Within a month, every line of credit Tyler had used to open his 3rd restaurant was called in. He didn't just lose the wedding. He lost the business he had failed at twice already and was somehow about to fail at for a 3rd time, except this time there was no one left willing to bail him out. My parents tried, one more time, to reach me. Not to apologize. To ask for help. My father called Daniel's phone, since I had blocked his, and asked if I would consider, quote, softening my statement, since the case was, quote, tearing this family apart. I want you to think about that phrasing for a second. Not Sophie. Not what Tyler did. The family being torn apart by a statement. As if the iron stand had swung itself. I had Daniel put the phone on speaker. Tell him, I said, loud enough for my father to hear, that the family was torn apart the night they chose Tyler's pride over my daughter's skull. I just finally noticed. He didn't call again after that. The criminal case took almost 5 months. Tyler pleaded down to a lesser charge in exchange for probation, anger management courses, and a restraining order keeping him away from Sophie until she turns 18. It wasn't everything. But it was on record, permanently, in a county database that doesn't care how many wedding photographers his family used to hire. My mother sent one final message, months later, through my aunt, the only relative who still speaks to both sides. The message said they were ready to move forward as a family and hoped I would let go of the past for Sophie's sake. I sent one message back. Sophie has a 4-inch scar above her ear that we cover with her hair for school pictures. She is the one who gets to decide, someday, if she wants any of you in her life. Until she's old enough to make that choice herself, the answer is no. I haven't heard from any of them since. Here's what I know now that I didn't know standing in that ballroom with blood on my hands. For 31 years, I thought loyalty meant absorbing whatever my family threw at me and calling it love. I thought if I just gave enough, forgave enough, stayed quiet enough, eventually they would see me the way they saw Tyler. They never did. And the night they finally showed me exactly who they were, in front of 200 witnesses and a security camera that didn't lie, was the same night I finally understood something I wish someone had told me when I was 18, packing boxes for a school I never got to attend. You cannot buy your way into a family that was never going to choose you. You can only protect the family you build after you stop trying. Sophie's hair has grown back over her scar now. She still collects rocks. She still cries during the nature documentaries. And she has never once asked about her grandparents, her uncle, or that wedding, because in her world, the day simply ended with her parents holding her tight and a doctor with a kind voice who let her pick a purple bandage. That's the version of that night I want her to remember. Not the ballroom. Not the ring. Just the 2 people who never once let go of her hand. If this story meant something to you tonight, stay a little longer and tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment, and some nights, knowing strangers across the world are sitting with people like Maya and Sophie is the only thing that makes telling these stories worth it. Take care of the people who actually protect you, not the ones who only show up for the photos.